Coming to you from the Deep South, this is the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. High-impact leadership is not reserved for leaders, and it has nothing to do with your position, title, or rank. However, it does have everything to do with your character. It's time to climb to the next level and beyond, personally and professionally. Now, let's start making it happen with your host, Max Story.
Hello, and thanks for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast today. Today, we made it up to episode 462. Today's episode is titled, Those Who Are Highly Intentional Are Likely to Become Highly Inspirational. If you've been following along, you know today's episode, we're actually on part 29 of 31, and our focus today is on chapter 28 of 30 in the book, The Ladder of Influence, 5 Steps for Climbing to the Next Level and Beyond, written by my wife, Rhea Story. So today we're on the final episode related to the 5th step. The 5th step, if you remember, is contribution of service over time. The title in the book of chapter 28 is actually Mastering the 5th Step. So let's dive into that and wrap up this 5th step. And then there'll be a couple of additional chapters to close up the series on the book. Got 2 more chapters after this. And just want to start out saying that mastering the 5th step isn't really about getting anywhere or climbing any higher. It's about becoming more and more of who you were meant to be. Because at some point, the purpose of your growth isn't to take you anywhere different than where you are, but rather for you to become the best you can be right where you are. That's actually the opening paragraph from chapter 28, written by Rhea. And we've been doing this for quite a while now, just honing in on trying to become better, being more of who we are and who we're meant to be. We're actually kind of going through that phase at this moment. Right now, as I'm recording this podcast, I'm thinking, unless I'm posting some interviews, which I'm on schedule some of those coming up once this series is over. But for a brief period, I may not post every week on this podcast like I've been doing for 7 years. But part of that is we're doing exactly what we're talking about here in this 5th step. We're just trying to hone in. We do a lot of development. We do it all across the board. We deal with entry-level folks. We deal with frontline leaders, middle-level leaders, upper-level leaders, top-level leaders. We talk about personal development, team building, leading through change, leading Kaizen continuous improvement events as a high-impact facilitator. We talk about cultural transformation. We help leaders become better leaders. We got tons of content. So part of what we're doing right now is kind of, we're having some strategy sessions this week. As I'm recording this podcast, we're actually home this week, and we're putting a lot of time into getting out the whiteboard and talking about honing in on our mission. Like, what, out of all the stuff we do, what should we really be focused on the most? Yes, we got lots of content. We can help people in all kinds of ways, but what should we be focused on the most? And what we're talking about, what we're trying to do is actually what we're talking about today on this podcast, mastering the 5th step. And I'll say it again, what Rhea's words, mastering the 5th step isn't really about getting anywhere or climbing any higher. It's about becoming more and more of who you were meant to be. So we're stepping back, looking in the mirror, figuring out, as Rhea and I have grown so much over these years, and we've grown together as well. Our business is really the 2 of us doing what we do together. We kind of started out with, I had my stuff, she had her stuff, and then together we kind of had our stuff, but it's really kind of grown into our stuff. We focus on that lane mostly, but we're just trying to fine tune. And I'm just sharing that as an example with you of kind of what it looks like mastering this 5th step. We've done this many times, but we figured out it's time to do it again and hone in on what we're most passionate about, because we can do whatever we want to do. We can be whoever we want to be, same as you, but we've got to be intentional about it. And that's why I named this episode, Those Who Are Highly Intentional are likely to become highly inspirational. That's my goal and Ria's goal, is to be highly inspirational together as often as possible and as much as possible. So that's just, a little bit of personal sharing. I'm also doing the same thing with my newsletters on LinkedIn. If you were to follow that, if you're subscribed to my newsletter on LinkedIn, if you're not, get on LinkedIn, check it out. And if you like it, hit that subscribe button and you'll get it in your inbox, in your email that you have set up on LinkedIn. You'll also get it in LinkedIn in your message box, but you'll get it straight to your email if you're interested. And I've been doing those for quite some time, and I do one a week. And I switched it recently to just start doing one every other week. But actually, I think I may switch that one to once a month, and just try to hone in more on whatever it is Ria and I come up with that we're really going to be focused on. Not sure if it's going to be focused on individual development or leadership development of formal authority leaders, or cultural transformation as a whole. We're probably always going to be doing all of that stuff that we've always been doing, but we're just trying to get our message really razor sharp, aligned with our mission. So that's what you should start to see or hear, depending on if you're watching us on YouTube or feel or read. Again, depending on if you're reading newsletters or if you listen to the podcast. But once I finish this series, other than interviews, because I'm always going to do the interviews whenever they pop up, whenever we can get them scheduled, whenever our schedule allows us to make it happen, we're going to be dropping those out on the podcast and on the Real People Getting Real Results YouTube channel, our playlist on our Blue Collar Leadership YouTube channel, whenever those fit. They could be many of them back to back, or they could be one every now and then sporadically. But you should start to feel us honing in on something moving forward if you're a regular listener of the podcast. So Ria says, contribution of service over time is about the lasting legacy you create by living one intentional day followed by another. One intentional choice at a time. One intentional encounter at a time. And this is the key component, component she ends up with: compounded over a lifetime. So contribution of service over time is about the lasting legacy you create by living one intentional day followed by another, one intentional choice at a time, one intentional encounter at a time, compounded over a lifetime. And again, what I just shared with you, that's what we're doing. We're becoming more intentional about each day, more intentional about each choice, more intentional about the encounters that we're having. Kind of already done that. I get requests all the time. People want to be on this podcast. I ain't interested. I tell them I only feature people on here that I know personally. Most of them are clients who are getting results, either through our books or through our training or doing book studies or where we come and spoke at their organization, something like that. That's usually who you hear us interviewing. I mean, always. It's somebody that I know personally. Not that I just answered an email and somebody says, oh, I got a great idea. I've been doing some cool stuff. I want to share it with the audience. I get those weekly, multiple times. I just hit delete. I don't even respond. I get too many of them. My podcast is for me to share mine and Ria's content, to help others who value our content, and then also shine our light on other people who are getting value from our content and share their stories. Because as we're shining our light on them and they're sharing their stories and they're doing some of what we're talking about here on the podcast, they're honing in, they're becoming intentional. They're actually climbing the ladder of influence. And we're just helping them, and they're helping us because they're motivational and inspirational to our audience and to us personally. I love getting the feedback from folks who are getting results. Ria says it'll take years of relentless dedication to master the fifth step. At this step, it's about your cumulative impact. Your influence at this step is based on the collective positive impact you've made in all the lives you've touched along your journey. So mastering the fifth step, she says, requires you to first master yourself. That's why we started at the first step, control of self. And then we moved into character development. Then we moved into competency development. Those first 3 steps is all about mastering yourself. And then that 4th step was a commitment to developing others. Now you're taking who you've become and helping other people climb their own ladder in their own way. It means you have the ability, have taken responsibility. And what I'm talking about when I say it, I'm talking about mastering the 5th step. It means you have the ability, have taken responsibility, and have the willingness to focus on improving yourself first before shifting your focus to helping others climb the ladder of influence. And it's a common theme throughout all my books, throughout all my podcasts, throughout everything I do, throughout my own life. We got to look in the mirror before we look out the window. Look in the mirror and see what all work do we have to do. And there's a bunch. You get up every day and look in that mirror and you're going to find something. There's something you need to improve on. Because as I often say, that quote I read from Michael Josephson, you don't have to be sick to get better. You got to know that. You got to be intentional, though. You got to be highly intentional to get better. So influence at the 5th step is very much developed as you lead by example and model what you've learned, because your followers and many others will always be watching. And Rhea says, saying one thing but doing another will destroy your credibility and influence, especially at the 5th step. Once your credibility has been wrecked, it may be rebuilt, she says, but it will never be the same, especially at the 5th step. If you've got a foot on this 5th step and you've been working on leaving this legacy within others, being a high impact leader, standing high on the ladder of influence, and you've gotten results and you've got a track record, if you goof up, do something stupid, make a big mistake, could even be a little mistake, it could cost you tremendously. You could make that same mistake when you're working on the 1st step, when you're working on control of self. You just first starting to climb the ladder of influence intentionally. You could make that same mistake when you're at that level of your development, and nobody may not even notice. They just think that's just who you are. That's just what you do. And you associate with people that's okay with. But when you reach the 5th step, you could do that same thing that was basically not even noticed when you were at a lower step, step 1, I'm talking about specifically at the moment. You can make that same mistake years later when you're working on the 5th step, and it could cost you a lot. It could cost you customers, clients, relationships, all kind of things, because people have basically put you on a pedestal relative to who you are, how you lead yourself, how you interact with other people. And you got a track record to prove that's who you are. Not just someone thinking that's who you are. That's who you are. But when you reach that level and then you make certain mistakes, pretty much any mistakes, they're going to be magnified like crazy, because people are going to start to wonder, what's going on within you that I don't know about? What you hiding from the rest of the world? Because if you make that kind of mistake, you can make a whole lot of other mistakes. If you're making these mistakes in the open, in the public, what you doing in private that don't nobody know about? So people really start to question, do they really know you? And because you know so much, it kind of be like someone who is an expert at calculus. And then somehow they get 8 plus 8 wrong. It's like, how do you do that? How do you not know 8 plus 8? If you're a calculus expert, you got to know basic math. But if there's some basic math that someone didn't know, they probably would never make it to learning calculus. Influence is slightly different, but I was just using that as kind of an example to show you how someone at a high level can make a low level mistake, because everybody kind of understands about math. Rhea says, be careful, be intentional, then be resilient. Even if we make that kind of mistake, no matter what step we're on, I'm telling you, you're going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes. Rhea's going to make mistakes. We're going to get it wrong. First, she says, be careful. Try not to. Be intentional, meaning live life on purpose. And then be resilient if you make a mistake. No matter what level you're at, if you make a mistake, you fall off that ladder. If you believe in the ladder, you get back on the ladder and start climbing again. You may make it to the 5th step. You may fall off because some serious judgment of character you have, a character decision you make, a character flaw. And you may not ever make it back to the 5th step because it takes time to get to that 5th step. A lot of work, a lot of not making mistakes, a lot of being who you say you are all the time, everywhere. And then sometimes people get sidetracked and they going to fall off the ladder, some people. But if you truly value it, you still can continue to improve your life by getting back on the ladder. Start climbing. You may not make it back to the 5th step this time. Hopefully you make it to the 4th step, though, where you can get back to your commitment to developing others, those who are willing to follow you in spite of whatever mistakes you might have had. But it may take time. You may have to get over that mistake. You got to get a track record going again. Some mistakes wipe your whole record clean. So you might have had a 5-year track record. Now, you screwed up yesterday, but you hadn't since then. Well, now you got a 1-day track record. A 5-year track record is going to give you a lot more credibility than a 1-day track record. See what I'm saying there? But Rhea's talking about being resilient. She says, it's what you do with what you've been given that counts. None of us were born into the same circumstances, had the same experience, or traveled the same path. A lack of opportunity or a life of adversity doesn't disqualify you from reaching the 5th step on the ladder of influence. And she ought to know, and she says this right here, and if you know her story, you know that she knows what I'm saying. And it's her line. She says, in fact, it may give you strength. And in the book, she gives some examples of some different people, some famous folks that have went through some adversity. I'm going to actually read them for you from the book. Just give you an example. You may not even know these folks. Some of you may have heard the name, but you don't really know about them. Some of them you may not ever have heard of. But it's just some examples of people who had a powerful impact on other people through influence. You may or may not like the people, but they developed a high degree of influence relative to people who value what they value, developed a large following, and made an impact. So these are some of the examples. Viktor Frankl was imprisoned in concentration camps by the Nazis. He lost his family and his wife, but went on to write one of the most influential books ever written. The title of that book is Man's Search for Meaning. Powerful book. Franklin Roosevelt was paralyzed by polio, went on to serve as president of the United States. Oprah Winfrey was born into poverty to a single mother in Mississippi and faced abuse in her early years and went on to host the highest rated TV show of its kind in history. Nick Vujicic was born with no arms and no legs. Today he's one of the world's top motivational speakers. And I've met Nick. I would say I shook his hand, but he ain't got no arms and legs. You with me? I gave him a pat on the shoulder and a hug. That's what I did. And don't think I'm making fun of Nick. I actually said that because if you hear Nick speak, he pokes fun at himself. I've heard him. They bring him out on the stage. He rides a motorized wheelchair most of the time. He'll get close to the stage with that, and then somebody will pick him up, carry him up on stage, set him on a table, and a lot of times he'll look out at the crowd and kind of look around with big eyes, and he said, "You just don't know. You think I got it all together, but," he said, "before I came up here, and even still, My knees are shaking and my palms are sweating. You know, everybody laughs. He's poking fun at himself. He says, okay, we're going to have some fun. He says he's got he's got a pair of shoes under his bed just in case, because he knows what God can do if he really wanted to. But that's Nick. Nick, I've heard lots of speakers speak, the good ones, the ones at the top. Rhea and I've paid a lot of money and traveled a lot of miles to go hear the best of the best speak. And I personally think Nick is the best of the best. You've probably seen him. You can look him up. His name is Nick. Last name is Vujicic. That's a tricky one to spell if you don't know it. Vujicic. Look him up. He got tons of videos on YouTube. People have videos of him on a surfboard, diving off a high dive in a swimming pool, swimming over to the side and getting out of the pool with no arms and legs. You've probably seen him. You just don't know who he is. You just think that's amazing. Well, he's an amazing speaker as well. That's just a couple of examples. There are thousands and thousands of examples of people with adversity. Rhea, you know, it ain't in this book, but she's got 3 books on her story. She was sexually abused by her biological father from age 12 to 19. I mean, horrifically, like you can't imagine. If you want to understand, go read her 3 books. Go to riastory.com/TEDx. So that's riastory.com/TEDx. You can see her 3 books there. You can also watch a 7-minute TEDx video of her speaking about the adversity. And she also gives a lesson in that 7-minute video about resilience. But she's accomplished some amazing things when you understand where she come from. No, she ain't been president of the United States. Everything's relative. It's all relative to where you come from. She has spoken at Yale University. So have I. She's spoken at the Capitol, the U.S. Capitol. Les Brown invited her to Los Angeles in 2014 to share the stage with him to speak at one of his events, and actually invited me to do that as well. But it all happened because of Rhea. And Rhea's story is powerful. If you ever looking for some inspiration, some powerful inspiration, read her 3 books. One of them is titled Rhea's Story. The other one is Beyond Bound and Broken. And the third one is Bridges Out of the Past. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you've had that same adversity or not. We've all had some adversity. Or you may know somebody who's had the exact same adversity that she faced. But it doesn't matter. Her books are for anybody who wants to be inspired and be resilient in spite of their circumstances. So check those out. And I've had a lot of people tell me when they get her books, they read them from cover to cover. They can't put it down. And she's got tons of teaching and lessons, but she's got her story seated throughout all those books. But it's pretty powerful. Rhea shares a quote from her grandmother in the Ladder of Influence, and she called her grandmother Granny Beverett, and she always says, or she says here in the book, Granny Beverett used to tell me, "Thank God it's as good as it is." That's just a reality check right there. It could always be worse. And I heard her great grandmother say that pretty much every time I ever saw her. She would say that. You know, we'd go to see her, and she was on up in years, and you know, ask her how she's doing. Usually that's the first thing came out of her mouth. Thank God it's as good as it is. It could always be worse. She's not with us today any longer. I mean, that's the ultimate relative to life on earth. That's about bad as it gets, is when you ain't here anymore. So there's lots of room for ways it could get worse. But Rhea says influencers come from around the world and throughout history. Each has faced their own unique adversity. We all have. It's part of the human condition. She says we all have chapters in our stories that are tough, painful, even heartbreaking at times. But what happens to us is not as important as who we become because of it. And I shared a little about Rhea's story and who has she become because of it. She become an amazing woman. I mean, her father used to make fun of her because she wasn't athletic. I mean, and he belittled her in all kind of ways. He didn't just physically abuse her and sexually abuse her. He psychologically abused her as well. She went through a lot of stuff, but she heard that for years and years and years. All he did was trying to demoralize her, control her, and he did from 12 to 19. And then she met me, and I put a stop to that. The day I found out it was happening is the day it ain't ever happened again since then. Today, as I'm recording this, we've been together over 25 years. I've seen her grow. If you watch her TEDx talk, she recorded that in 2017. That's 17 years after she escaped from that horrific abuse. Rhea says many times adversity in our lives becomes a seed from which our contribution of service sprouts. That's powerful. She knows it. But there's a lot of people. You could be one of them. There's a lot of people. Instead of becoming the victor over what happened to them, they become the victim because it happened to them. Myron Golden says victimhood is made possible when we allow contributing factors to become determining factors. That's a powerful quote. When you understand that and you can live it out in your life, you can apply it. You don't have to be the victim any longer. And if you choose to climb this ladder of influence, get Rhea's book, listen to this series, and climb your way up, that bad stuff that happened to you can become a platform for you to climb the ladder of influence in a highly effective and influential way. Bob Goff says this: things that go wrong can shape us or scar us. That's pretty powerful. Rhea says, honor where you are as you move to where you want to be. You should strive to be remembered as a person with a high degree of character who treated small and large responsibilities the same. At the fifth step, there are no small responsibilities because they all have a large impact. So I shared with you about being invited, Rhea and I being invited back in 2014 to share the stage with Les Brown at an event he was hosting in Los Angeles, California. I want to share a quote with you from Les. He says, when you decide to pursue greatness, you are taking responsibility for your life. This means you are choosing to accept the consequences of your actions and to become the agent of your mental, physical, spiritual, and material success. You may not always be able to control what life puts in your path, but I believe you can always control who you are. That's pretty powerful from Les Brown. That's coming from a man who was born on the floor of an abandoned building and given up for adoption. He got his own story of adversity. Check him out if you don't know who he is. Rhea says you must transform from who you are today into who you have the potential to become. That's what climbing the ladder of influence is all about. There's a few of you out there going to master this fifth step. We don't really ever know. We just got to keep working on it. Our legacy, who we are after we're gone, will really determine if we truly mastered this fifth step. We may not ever realize we did it. Or we may think we did it and we didn't actually do it. It's what happens really after we're gone, when we really find out who mastered this fifth step. But Rhea says transformation doesn't happen in one day. It happens every day. I'm going to read a paragraph close to the end of this chapter. Rhea says, everyone who got to where they are started from where they were. Only you can hold you back. Only you can define what success at the fifth step means for you. Only you can make the choices that will help you master the fifth step. You determine what you will and won't do. That's pretty powerful. I'll leave you with a quote here from Beswick Barrington. This quote goes like this: many are known for what they have taken. I would rather be known for what I have given. Pretty powerful. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Join me the next couple of weeks and we'll wrap up this series. Talk to you next time.
Make it happen or someone else will. It might as well be you. Are you serious about taking your career and your life to the next level and beyond? Check out Mac Story's Blue Collar Leadership series books and others, now available on audio, along with paperback and ebooks at Amazon and Audible. Please visit bluecollarleadership.com to learn about Mac's books, programs, special offers, and more. Thank you for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast.